Research, Safety and Efficacy Testing for Psycho-Immunology Treatments by Dr. Kirsten Lykkegaard and Dr. Grant McFetridge. Copyright Dr. Kirsten Lykkegaard.
There's very different risk levels between the clients, the test clients, and the researchers. And the highest risk level is for the researchers. Unlike medicine, where you take poor little animals and you torture them to death, in this PI research, you take yourself and torture yourself to death. And so you learn basically what's going on from the inside. Now, of course, you may not have the disease that you're working on, but you're going to heal the stuff that's relevant to that disease yourself. So it's kind of a scale of risk, as you can see on the screen here. How do I move forward? Thanks. Okay, so what we found over the years, there's real confusion in clients and therapists about what the difference is between an experimental and a release process. And that's partly historical, because in the old days, we were moving as fast as possible, changing as fast as possible. And there we go. And it wasn't always obvious to people that, for the most part, everything was experimental. And as time went on, we started to build the structure that you see now. We always wanted to in the beginning, but we were able to start to build it. And we were able to separate the research from the actual processes that our therapists are using. So that confusion actually continues to today, partly because people sometimes pick up our textbooks and they look inside there and they go, holy shit, this could kill me, or wow, this is just too strange, or whatever they're thinking, and they don't recognize the difference between a pure research book and an applied thing that we use with clients. When I'm speaking to clients, and I do quite often, who have this confusion, I tell them it's just like drug research. In the research that we do, it's very much like we're working on that. It's what they're thinking is that it's all the processes are experimental, and instead, sorry, I'm having a blank out in my head here. And I try and help them understand the difference. And I say, it's just like the difference between buying stuff out of the pharmacy under the supervision of your physician, or going into a research and development facility and start swallowing pills randomly that are laying around on the desks and such. So, and that tends to help when I'm talking to people this way. Okay. So why are there safety risks at all with what we're doing? Well, there's the usual safety risk of doing trauma healing, which we've put into our disclosure forms and everything else. But PI has separate risks, partly because this is so new for us. We've really only been developing this in the last year, essentially since COVID started. And so there are risks that we may not know about. However, the ones that we do know about are when you start messing with pathogens, they get pissed. So sometimes they attack, sometimes they freeze, and sometimes they try and hide in your membranes and stuff. Also, this work is changing the interior of the cell, and so it can adjust or change the balance between the pathogens and how the pathogens and you interact. So, for example, in one case, I remember we had a sudden overgrowth of prions, bugs. We did something and suddenly there were bugs everywhere. Yeah, and the third thing is sometimes the target disease, you do a good job on that, but it was actually holding the dike on some other disease, and that starts to ramp up. So there's these practical things that ahead of time, they're hard to predict. And then, of course, it's the usual problems that we see. The client can't fix something, the client gets started and they can't finish. The stuff that you're more used to as a trauma therapist. You want to say anything? That's good. Okay, so legal requirements. Right now, as you know, drug research is highly regulated. Thank you. I couldn't remember the word, but our work doesn't really have those kinds of regulations, mostly because nobody believes what we do is possible. So what we do instead is we look to the regulations that exist right now on doing therapy. And even therapy is a little mild because trauma therapy is a bit different than regular therapy, but we do our best to to adapt those to what we're doing. Now, having said that, there are some diseases, especially when we're doing basic research, that we are inventing brand new techniques. And for those, we generally write a specific disclosure form. So if you go online, you can click onto the different projects we have, and there'll be a disclosure form specifically for that particular disease. Now, for applied PI, which is what this course is about, we can get away with a more generic liability form. We might want to write a specific one for PI because it's so new, but at the present time, we've been using our current disclosure for trauma and such, given the some of the diseases that we have special forms for. The last point is something called IRBs. Those are institutional review boards, and it's really been set up for academia to make sure that people aren't doing unethical research on people, and partly because people were doing unethical research on people. And so this is kind of, in some ways, it's an overreaction. It started to get popular about 2010, and now it's sort of almost a religion. And for that, the problem is it's really set up for academia, not for private companies like ourselves. So we have to kind of wiggle and fit and see what we can do to make our work fit inside those contexts. Fortunately, that really only shows up for publications. And even then, not all the time. So we can still present at conferences without it. Okay, so how do we make PI processes safe? And this whole lecture is really dear to my heart because this problem we started encountering back in the 1990s and the early 2000s, and we were having injuries and deaths all the time. So how do you make it safe? Well, we visualized in, I think it was 1998 or 7, this current structure of the Institute with certified therapists, with training, with basically what you see today. We didn't have it back then. We didn't have enough people. We didn't know enough. But the structure you see today basically came out of these safety issues. And that was the primary driver, because honestly, I wouldn't have done it otherwise. It was just too much hassle and too much pulling me away from what core research was about. But to make it safe, we decided that this structure was probably the best way. And as you'll see later, that is one of the differences between us and what other people are doing. Okay, so I'm going to start out this discussion by describing the stages of research. And the three I'm going to compare to are engineering, drug research, and of course our own psycho-immunology. Okay, so in what we do with psycho-immunology, we start out with research. Now, it depends on what kind of research we're doing, if it's applied or basic, but essentially it's figuring out, can we do stuff? And then we go into a testing phase. And the testing phase is broken into 2 parts. Well, excuse me, let me back up on research. In research, we have a couple of clients with the disease who are willing to take the risks. And we do absolutely everything in our power to minimize those risks, but they're risks. And you have to have a good relationship with these people because you're going to be experimenting on them. It's going to fail. You want to have these people be willing to collaborate with you in the research process and really understand that things can go wrong. Now, in the next phase, after you think you've got something to work, you go into testing, and that's broken into 2 parts. You test on healthy people first, and that's just like in the drug companies. And you want to make sure that that you don't have any weird reactions with healthy people. the second part of that is you start testing on sick people.
So the healthy people part is where therapists and researchers are the first in line, first researchers.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why the institute's set up. I needed healthy people to be able to test in, who would also give me feedback. More? Okay. Okay. So after we think it's tested adequately, we go on to therapist release, and that's where we usually start with the clinic. For a couple of reasons. One, if we can make some investment back, but primarily it's a safety reason. The clinic people are well trained, they know what they're doing, and they have access to the core research team. So it allows us to really try and shake out the bugs. And after that, maybe 1 or 2 years, then we do it cautiously to certified therapists. Now, sometimes when we think it's a minor thing, we go quicker or we skip the clinics completely, but that's the usual process. We do continuous process improvement. That's a bit different than, say, selling a drug or an electronic gizmo, because the Institute is constantly improving and understanding and bettering our models. And so sometimes we can look back and say, we would really like to have this work better, and now we see a way to do it. So there's a cycle there that we go through pretty much constantly. And one of those examples is silent mind technique. We came up with the SMT, in 2010 or 11, but I've never been happy with it. I wanted it to be more effective. And it's only been now in the last year that we are able to actually use psycho-immunology techniques. And I think that it's a much more simple way. Okay. And the final step is publication. And some people get confused about this, and you guys should understand this. We wait on publication. If you look at the subcellular handbook, that was all material that was pretty much done by 2010. So we waited essentially 4 years before I was willing to publish. And that's true of a bunch of the other stuff that we're doing also. And the reason is we just need that time to find out if something's going wrong. People are complex, and you can do 90 people, no problem, and then 10 people has an issue, but you don't know until you've tested a bunch of people. 1 out of 10, you have to have at least 10 to get that one person. So the publication, we just basically wait on. The other thing is there's some things we're just not willing to publish. And as you guys know, we've never put into writing anything on rapid wholehearted healing, for example, intrinsically unsafe. And if you look in the subcellular handbook, you'll see often it says under treatment, it says a proprietary peak states institute process. And basically those are anything we did with regression. We were just concerned that if we gave out steps for regression to the general public, that would be bloody unsafe. And we'd be up to our hips in lawsuits. Okay. So when you're thinking about what you're doing, thinking about how to present it. And you can write a lot of stuff without giving the steps. You can write the outcomes. Like that.
Yes, symptoms and outcomes.
Yeah. And that actually has an impact on the book we're writing now. How do we write the PI book? Because it basically gives an uneducated, completely unaware group of people access to incredibly powerful tools.
Which is probably why we will just write it and have it internally first and see what we think.
Exactly. But at least we need to write it for you guys and ourselves too, so we don't forget this stuff. Okay. So here's a picture of a flowchart of how research works.
This is the engineer.
No, this is us.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm saying.
Oh, you want to explain?
No.
Yeah, go.
This is, as you see this chart here, this is how an engineer puts together a workflow, I guess, of things. All these, whether it's a diamond shape or a square, it means something. And so for Grant, this one has deeper meaning than for anyone else looking at it, I think.
That could be true. I look at it and I instantly recognize everything on it, that sort of thing. The little triangles are decision points where you get a yes or no. Do you go forward or do you stop? That sort of thing. The little blocks are where you do shit. And if you watch the flow, you guys see a pointer? Yeah, can you see a pointer? It shows up, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So here's the research stage where you're doing all of the different kinds of research and you're working with clients and cautious and all that. And then at some point you say, is it safe and effective? Well, as far as you can tell. And if it's no, you just keep doing it and you keep looping in that loop. But if you decide with some real nervousness that it's probably safe and effective, then you go on to the testing stage. And that's a hassle because now you're involving a bunch of people. And as you saw with COVID, do you guys remember how often we did testing on COVID? And then we ended up not even using that process. So testing stage can be really a pain. And so again, you can be looping around in the testing stage. So for example, you say it's not safe and effective, but we can do minor changes. And then you go back to testing. Sometimes you say minor changes don't work. And then you're back in the research pit. Can you see how this could be really annoying? Especially to someone like Shane who wants us to be on schedule. Yeah, it's just the R&D and environment is very different than most business environments. Okay, so now you've decided it's safe and effective and you go on to the therapist stage. And that's where we release it cautiously to the clinics or maybe directly to the certified therapists. Those are people that we have direct connection with. And so we can get instant feedback if something's not wrong. One of the reasons we have charge for results is to get that feedback. Because what we found in the past is that therapists were so used to just doing stuff and getting paid regardless. They wouldn't give us any feedback if it worked or not because it wasn't important to them. They were getting paid anyway. So having charge for results automatically made this feedback for the process doesn't work because we'd get a phone call from the therapist saying, this shit doesn't work, and I didn't get paid. You're an asshole, right? So this was really a good process for safety and testing. Okay, so now we've done some period of time and we wait to make sure that there's not unusual problems as we see more and more people. And then we decide whether it's safe enough for the public to publish the whole thing. If it is, we publish. If it isn't, we don't. Some things, like I said, are just intrinsically not publishable. Was that diagram relatively clear?
Yes, I have a question, Grant.
Sure.
What is the case fixed with known techniques? The above testing stage, there is a case?
Yeah. So say we give it to you guys as a therapist. And we say, well, it isn't quite safe and effective. We got to change it. There's a problem we've discovered. So is it a minor change? If it is, we just stay where we are with the therapist. But if it's a major change required, now the question becomes, do we need raw basic research or can we use something we already know? Maybe we can apply some other technique that we know and be fairly sure that it would work, but it's a big change. And in that case, we pop back into the full testing thing. If we can't fix it with known techniques, then it's back into the research pit. And off we go. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, thanks.
Yeah. So why am I drawing this? Because these stages are there for safety and effectiveness. So one, we have to get paid for results to work. And the other is we have to make sure that they're safe. And these patterns are used by other industries, as we'll see shortly. Okay. So that pattern is very similar to engineering. The stages of engineering are very similar. It's less similar to drugs, which is really interesting, except in one area. Drug testing, where they actually do phase 1 and phase 2 testing, and maybe phase 3, are similar to our testing phases, but the rest not really. And the reason is really interesting. In engineering, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to understand why it works or doesn't work. And you expect it to work, 100% of the time, or if it doesn't, you have to know why. In medicine, they don't really have any good underlying models. They don't actually expect it to work. They do a lot of Monte Carlo playing around, trying to find something that'll work, because they don't really have a handle on their parameters.
They do actually expect it to work,
Well,
but not 100%.
But they don't know why.
Not like engineers.
Not
They're
like
actually
engineers.
happy if
she's a medical person, and I'm an engineer person. So yeah. Oops. Go ahead. Go.
I mean, they wouldn't put it into drug development if they didn't think that it would. But again,
but they don't have a good underlying model.
No. And so when they accept that in 60% of the cases they get a result, that's considered a good result.
Yes.
Whereas in engineer, you would never sell an iPhone if it was only working 60%.
Well, you might sell a PC, but you certainly wouldn't sell an iPhone at 60%.
So that's I think the difference in the overall attitude, I think you can say.
Well, I'd like to actually expand on that, because my experience in medicine is minimal, but I think they exploit phenomenon. So they come across some chemical that has some observable result, and often they don't know why. True?
Not fully, because in part of the...
Can they go backwards? Can they design a drug based on basic principles?
That's what they're actually trying to do.
They try, but do they?
But at the same time, the part that goes wrong in medical research is that knowing what the disease is actually the cause of it, and therefore they bundle together probably. And there's been a good book written by Christensen, a professor from Harvard, I believe, where he actually says that part of that result that I was talking about, that it's only giving maybe 60% of some kind of moving the disease in a direction that is desirable, is that the disease itself is not understood well enough, so that when you have the inclusion criteria for the clinical trial, you have more people in there. It's like if we said Asperger is everything that with people who don't connect well with other people, instead of we have the glass wall, which is a subset of that group. So if you imagine that you have a group of people saying, now I come from the obesity field, that you have obesity, but there can be different reasons for that. That isn't just one. And now you're pushing a drug that does one thing, for example, which is in this case a thing that has been developed because they think they understand, or we think we understand something.
So the bottom line for me is medicine doesn't understand why the diseases are there.
Yeah.
Flat out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in engineering, you cannot afford that kind of behavior. So a lot of our stages are much more similar to engineering, except in the testing area. Then we're a lot more similar to drugs.
Yep.
Do we have agreement?
Good.
Good.
Yes.
All those kinds of problems are huge in the medical field. They're less a problem for us. And part of that is when we get to the therapist phase, it's pay for results. And the clients are expecting you to come up with something that works. Okay. All right. So here's a quick comparison of the stages. Psycho-immunology on the left, engineering in the middle, and medicine on the right. And I find this fascinating personally. You guys may not find it as interesting, but the bottom line for me is we're way more like an engineering research and development outfit, partly because we're so focused on research and the fundamental research.
But like you say, testing here, healthy volunteers, sick volunteers, this is very similar over here. Phase 1 is healthy. Phase 2 and 3 are people with the disease.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so I could go through this slide on stages of engineering. I think the part that's really significant is the first couple of lines on this slide, and that's demonstration or proof of principle. Now that really applies to basic research, but you actually have to come up with something that does something. In other words, you come up with a breakthrough in understanding that's just not been done before, and then it does something that you feel is important. So that's called proof of principle. It shows that you've got something. Now, maybe it's really hard to do, and maybe it doesn't work reliably, and yada, yada, yada. but you're exploiting a phenomenon, and you have a model that says this makes sense. Now, for applied research, the next stage is called prototyping in engineering, and that's where you build gizmos. And at this point, you are trying to make stuff that is going to be similar to what you sell. And that's where you guys would come in with applied research. You'd be doing prototyping. The basic proof of principle stuff's already been demonstrated, and now it's applying what you're learning. Okay, that's good. And then the rest of the stages kind of make sense. Product testing, manufacturing, sales, and product engineering. That last one, product engineering in engineering circles, is basically there because parts go obsolete. Engineering changes so fast that in 3, 4, 5 years, stuff you designed with is no longer available because they've moved on to newer or better products. So they have a group of people called production engineers who have to figure out how to put something into that hole that was left when the product part that they were using is no longer available. We have something similar, but it's more we keep an eye on the products and say, can we do better? Now, some products we would say they're good enough, like body associations. Do we want to do better than that? The only thing that could be better than that is to get rid of all body associations at once. But that's already a pretty simple technique. Yeah. But there's other things, again, I'll use silent mind technique, where it was clear that a better, simpler, faster, easier treatment would be desirable. So for us as an institute, we're constantly doing this product engineering. Can we improve it? And monitoring basically what we're doing. Shane, do you want to add anything to that?
No, nothing to add.
Kirsten? Okay. As you guys, if you guys stay with the institute and stuff, you'll be getting that way yourself. You'll be thinking about your cool little process, and you'll be going, it's been out for 2 years, but really I'd like to make it better. Or I could, now that I've learned this new thing from the institute, maybe we can improve on it, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Okay, in drugs safety clinical trials, that's Kirsten's bailiwick. You want to quickly go through that? What she thinks important for PI?
Yeah, so the proof of principle actually applies to developing a drug as the part. Oh, hey Lars.
Hey Lars.
And then quickly after that is actually a phase still in the preclinical study phase here, where there's a lot of legal requirements. So you've heard of toxicology studies and all that. That belongs to in here. That allows sort of a transition to what is called safety. That's testing, and that's probably what you might have done, Julian, where that's a single dose usually, and it's multiple levels of doses, and that's to assess, is this drug, does it have side effects just from one dose, and how does it look over a scale of different dosages. Mm-hmm. So that's a preparation for phase 2. You want to say here, so in PIs. Oh yeah, so in this case, in our PI work, we sometimes can use ourselves for this phase, and usually we also do. I mean, that is actually what we do. Right?
What we do, yeah, as a group.
As a group. So as we did with the COVID last year, where we had several meetings and where we went through all the different tastes, and that was like a phase 1 safety.
Now, as you've encountered some of the diseases, especially infrastructure diseases, the ones that everybody has, it's a little difficult. There is nobody who can safely test it. So we basically go directly to the disease phase. So that would be a Borg or pine cones or manipulation fungus or stuff like that.
But then maybe you are avoiding people having strongly the issue. So people that are already merged with the Borg or are really intensely affected by the disease, you will not test it on those for the phase 1, right?
Phase 1, correct.
Yeah, if we could deselect those, yes.
Yeah. Essentially, for us, phase 1 is basically in-house.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah. And actually, a lot of the times, it's just the research team, which now includes you in the future.
Certified therapist.
Because otherwise, the certified therapist would be the next kind of ring out.
Yeah.
But still in this phase, I would,
Yeah. So think phase 1 is certified therapists, really. Okay, phase 2.
Yeah. So phase 2 is where you, in that phase in drug development, you usually have people with the disease. It's a bigger population, up to a couple of hundreds, maybe 300, and it's multiple dosing also usually. And it says here, if you look it up on, I think you took this from Wikipedia, but actually I've seen a lot of phase 2 studies where placebo, it is compared to placebo, because as a drug company, you just don't want to invest in something that doesn't have more than placebo effect. So you want to know right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, we usually use clients via therapists in our work, so that we actually get people with the disease, and where we have good feedback via the therapists. Phase 3, that's definitely in the right patient group in the drug development, and it's usually in thousands of patients. This phase is the longest. It was the one that takes the longest time. A lot of studies last at least six months, a lot of them 12 months, and there are actually multiple sets of studies in this. So if you have I've seen studies now that has included up to 10,000, and you can just see the vaccines that came out here. They had actually 40,000 people in their testing, 20,000 in each group. And so if you develop a drug for a disease like cardiovascular or something, you might actually assess it in different sub-patient groups in this phase, in the phase 3, which then can spread over a couple of years, maybe even 3 years. But that's because the phase 3 that's what makes up what you can put in the label. This is what you can say. So that's why you can say Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is a 1-shot and AstraZeneca is a 2-shot. And that's a decision point that the company made when they went into phase 3. So AstraZeneca, they didn't take the chance. They said, okay, let's do a 2-dose shot to make sure that we get immunity. Because if they hadn't done that and their first shot would only have given 40% immunity, they would have a lousy product on the market. So it's a kind of risk assessment that the company makes here, how they want to test their drug, because it makes it into the label. And so for us, this is where we have released it already. And so this, so in this phase, our process is released, and we get more and more data. That's where you can say the silent mind is in phase 3 still, in a sense, or everything that we have. Well, post-marketing after phase 3 in drug development is actually that same phase. There's so much collecting of data. That's why you have to report to your doctor if you actually have more side effects than is written on the what is it called, the piece of paper in the that comes along with the pills or whatever.
So phase 2, you said phase 2 and phase 3, it's released to certified therapists to test on client, but phase 2, it said it's maybe a selection of certified therapists to be able to test it on client for phase 2, right?
Yeah,
it could be.
Yeah,
depending on what.
Sometimes we do it ourselves. Yeah, sometimes the research team does it, but it's better if the certified therapist can do it. So often after they're a guinea pig, they know how to do the thing, and then we have them try it out on clients. Yeah, but it's, there's risks. So if we look, do we have a risk plot? No, that's further on.
Yeah.
Okay, so clinical drugs. If we compare the way drugs in psycho-immunology work for sample size and for length, we're quicker. But again, it's the difference between the medical model, where they're basically dosing you with chemicals and they're not exactly sure what's going to happen. They can't really predict it. Whereas in our case, we can predict way more. And if we can't predict it, basically we just often just keep it in research until we can predict it. So it's a really different mindset, much actually, closer to engineering.
Now that you say that, one of the things is that from here to here, in this phase, all that is in cells and in animals and animal different species. So you have a rodent and you have a non-rodent. That's regulatory prerequisite that you have that before you transit to here. But the interpretation of data from animals to predict humans, that's called translational pharmacology, and how well does it translate is sometimes really good and sometimes not.
Not good.
Yeah.
Yeah. in our case, we have to work with people right from the get-go. So how risky are the stages? Now, this is the thing that is important to you. And Kirsten, you want to talk about it?
So the color coding here is the different research types that we also talked about in the last chapter. So the green is what we're trying to accomplish with having you on board, is to have a research set that does the PI applied research. Whereas some of us has gotten ourselves involved in this phase, which is the highest risk. And then we have what we call practitioner research, which we also talked about last time, which is the therapist who applies something to a client in the get-go to solve an issue. So if you look at the different phases that we just went through, so the proof of principle is where the highest risk is. This is a range, so it's not definite that it's this high. It can be down here, but you risk that it actually is really high. And so the basic researchers are putting themselves out here together with whoever they have partnered up with, who's willing as a research subject. That could be a type 1 diabetes person, it could be an Alzheimer person, it could, anyone with a disease that of interest who has, and like Sonia was explaining on our symposium, how she has actually joined the Institute over 10 years almost. Her journey through exploring this disease, she has been this and iterating in that loop that Grant was saying, that went from proof of principle to prototyping, back to proof of principle, on different test goes on trying to solve this disease. So what we're hoping, and as you can see here, when you go to the prototyping, for the basic researcher, this is higher risk than what we hope and believe that it will be for you guys. Mm-hmm. So because you'll be applying things and you'll use roadmaps that have been built over in the blue framework. And
yeah, this is not only for you personally, but for clients. So
yeah, this is actually the client. Sorry,
that's okay.
Yeah,
they often map together.
Yeah, so this, like I said to begin with, that this talk is to make it safe for the client. This is, but it reflects on how safe is it for you. So that's why I was.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Just to comment, maybe if you want later to modify the colors, because it's confusing, the blue and the green for the prototype versus the client. So it's not easy to get.
No, it's all. Oh, okay. So it should say
because
for
the
client
research and basic research with no client. So when I look at that, I'm like,
yeah, right. This says basic research, but it's actually for the client.
For the clients who are doing basic research. Yeah.
So for the clients who are in here, yeah, you're right about that. That's a confusing. It wasn't the colors, right? It was the text on the.
Yes, yeah, associated with the colors. Yes, the text. For me, I don't ask others, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
So just to make sure, this is a risk for the clients at the different phases of the different kinds of processes, whether it's basic, applied, or practitioner. Oh.
Okay, just make a note here.
Yeah. I like this graph. So I'm not going to change it.
No, we can change it. Okay, so if you look at the risk, I mean, we made this so that you can actually relate the three to, we have them further down by themselves, but this is where you see them side by side, so that you can see for clients who come into the PI research phase here and here and here, it's less than, in these two phases, it's less than for the clients that we have in our basic, that we pull in to do the basic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we call this the research stage. This is the testing stage for efficacy and safety. So that that's actually where the client is ourselves in the institute. Yeah. So when we do the PI process as a safety testing, it's more safe, than if we did a testing on something entirely new. I mean, with a new background from here and here. Let's say.
So practitioner research comes up towards the end there. And those are with known techniques, but you can see that oddly enough, the risk is higher because they're actually doing stuff that hasn't been done before.
Yeah. So by applying things to a client, in this case, a therapist out in practice takes things and combine them, say off-label, we'll come back to that. That increases, that has a slightly higher risk rate is what we have estimated it as, because it hasn't been through this safety testing over here. So.
And the last bit is publication. Notice how low the risk is. That's below the normal trauma issues. And that's because we don't want people to have normal trauma issues.
So I didn't actually go through that this has, no problems, normal trauma. So normal therapy would, be around this risk area here. We can induce, we heal a trauma help a client heal a trauma, and all hell breaks loose. So there's normal trauma issue risk factors there, all the way up to death. So.
Kirsten, the production one, I'm not sure I completely understand in that. One, why is the basic research client a lower risk than applied research? And it actually looks like it's even lower than just normal trauma issues. Is that just the scale's not quite right?
No, we did that on purpose, although at the moment I can't remember why.
I know we did it on purpose also.
Yeah. I think it has to do with yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. But the numbers are right because we did come up with this.
So I can conceptually understand that there might be a reason why a basic research client would be lower than applied research client, just because there might be some fundamental thing that's happened that's later on has reduced that risk later. I'm not sure I'd understand why that would be lower than normal trauma issues though.
Good question. And there is a reason. I just don't remember it at the moment.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
We've been very busy. This got written a couple of weeks ago. Okay. Good question though. Onward. Okay. So how do we handle practitioner research safety? So that's maybe of interest to you as a practitioner. That applies pretty much to all of the institute.
It's actually all of us in a sense.
Yeah, because you've got a client, you don't know what exactly to do, and you start throwing different techniques at them. So it actually happens a lot of times anyway. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So historically, the institute has been through different phases of what the institute has allowed, you can say, throughout the years of what therapists could do. And back when the institute was a lot smaller, everyone was actually everything was experimental. And so the border, the line between when you did research and when you did therapy was like on one blur. But at some point there were some deaths and also a handful of long-term injured students, staff, and volunteers. And that, I think it's actually had several periods like that in your lifetime here. And so it has evoked sort of the caution, and there was a long period up until actually where we met in Poland in 2019 for a long period there where therapists were not allowed to do any research. It was restricted to only be the research staff due to these safety issues. But officially in 2019, the ones that remember this in Poland, in Poland. There was a presentation by you, I think, and I think Shane, you might have said something too, that we no longer restrict therapists from doing research. But the caveat there is that if something goes wrong, we are not going to help you. And so there's no restriction that you can do research on yourself, for example, but what is restricted is what you do with clients and other people. So in other words, you can't just go out and say, I'm going to test this on my client and blah, blah, blah. There are, let's see.
It was in Switzerland, by the way.
Was it in Switzerland? I
No,
found that
I
it.
thought
I
it was
found it.
before
I
then.
found
No,
it in a
it was in
presentation.
Poland.
Yeah.
It might have been
Repeated in Switzerland. Yeah.
And actually effectuated in Switzerland, because that's where we said, okay, what do you guys, or what are you interested in? And you guys got together in groups and started doing some different projects. So maybe that was the
Yeah, it was where we had the first presentation of a group of certified therapists who'd done some therapist research and presented it at Switzerland, but it was because of the policy released in Poland, which was the Gaia communication one.
Yeah. Yep. And a few others. I think for Julian, I think you guys picked up the minimal sleep, and what else?
Yeah.
There were others. Yeah.
And I'm talking about a research project that was presented as opposed to the wish list of things that you would like to work on.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, so in the subcellular book, it has different passages that still are valid, and those are the ones that we can certainly understand why some people will want to do research on themselves, and we actually accept that as a personal choice. But if a person, and this still is what would happen, if a person starts using this material, gathers a group of people, and start doing some research with that group, it is certain in the experience of the Institute that will go wrong. And because of that, a person can actually be decertified if they start doing that. So
yeah, that was 2014. Yeah.
Yeah. So to minimize lawsuits, and also minimize that actually innocent people get hurt because a therapist is wanting to do something, this is okay, but doing this is not okay. So if you take a step back and just look at what we already, I think, defined doing research as a practitioner, what that means, and that's where we say, okay, you take something that's known, it's in the books, it's been published, or it's available to you, and you combine it in ways that hasn't been seen before. So that is like using a drug off label. And so this kind of work usually has a short term, and it's only, you're doing it with one client, or you start using it and it works well, you use it on more clients maybe.
And that's where we wish you'd put it in the forum.
Yeah, that's what I have down here.
Oh,
passing on knowledge to other therapists about the outcome of this type of research is crucial. Please use the therapist forum, or I don't know. There's the Facebook too, but I think the forum is better. So the risks are usually minimal, but they are there, and that's why that's actually why the liability and informed consent form is used in normal practice of therapist clients. So this is what we call research. Kind of you explore with what you have of what is known, and with that, that's what is assessed in this table, or in this bar graph here. So we would say that this is down by not normal trauma issues, but because it hasn't been through the safety testing over here, we have raised the bar up here so that we estimate that they're a little higher than normal. Again. So let's take a look. Like I said, we no longer restrict therapists from doing research. So now I'm jumping to using untested processes and techniques. You can't do that as a therapist on anyone except for yourself to start with. And here again are the criteria, just to iterate. We won't help you if something goes wrong. And we restrict that you can't do it with clients and other people, because we don't want innocent people to get harmed. So that being said, you can do research on yourself, but nobody else. And research stops when either you succeed or fail in yourself. However, if you want to move on from that testing on yourself, and you want to make it into a project where you say this could actually be something that is valuable for more people, but from that point, it needs safety testing. And this is where you need to then go through the next 3 stages that are on the next 3 slides here. So does this make sense to you guys, that you can use the PI research, what we call PI, practitioner research, is just being a therapist and experimenting with known things. If something comes out of it, please share it, something good. If something bad comes out, share that as well. But it's within what we call, it's already so safe that, I mean, side effects that comes out of combining, it's like combining drugs that has never been combined before and the side effects occur or a good thing occurs. That's that box. And once you move out of that box and start thinking, oh, this has never been tested or a technique, then you should think, oops, I need to think about, I mean, I can still do it on myself, but I can't involve anyone. I can't do it on a client. I can't do it on another therapist.
Can I add something?
Yep.
One of the big problems in this research in this field is, where do you get clients to test on? Where do you get people? And the Institute was designed to do just that, to have certified therapists, to have clients on call, all the rest. What we find over the years is folks who get involved with us, they see that as a resource. So they want to be famous or whatever they want to be. And then they call up all the people that they know in the Institute and they start running experiments without this kind of formal procedure. They're sort of bypassing all of the safety stuff, mostly because they've got friends or they know the people and the network is available. We don't want that to happen. If we want more rigorous safety things put in place. It's not that we want to discourage research now, which we used to do, but we want to do it in a safe way.
That's good. So the safe way, if you want to do this, would be to go through these 3 stages that are on the next 3 slides. So you can make a proposal and you can have other colleagues look at it and have Grant and I look at it. Then you have to sign a document that says that you understand that this is that we won't fix you if you get broken, and then you can do the work on yourself and nobody else at this stage. And then if that is successful, you can write up the result and then get feedback from your peers, and then move on to second phase, where you, after that has been proven, you can say you can then ask other colleagues to be volunteers in your project. And then you need a written disclosure from each one of them. Again, the Institute won't fix them if they get hurt. Everyone needs to have health insurance. And then you can move on to the third phase, which is where the research team take a look at the results from whatever you were doing. And we will see if what actually was going on and how does this go together. And it wasn't, the results didn't come out of some kind of weird damaging thing going on. Get agreement. Do you have any comments here?
So all of those steps will be for us once we finish the training, kind of something like that.
No. This is if you personally.
Okay, the regular. Regular.
As a therapist, once you get, in this training should give you the actually that you're in a project group where you are. I mean, you guys have signed disclosure forms that therapists haven't signed, that this is, you've taken a step into the more experimental. And so
it's basic research, basically. They're
doing basic research on themselves.
And we're trying to make sure it's safe as possible if they want to continue. Yeah. In the old days, we just said no. You have to leave the Institute if you're doing basic research.
So here is what applies to you guys. This is only the safety part, though. So this is an unknown area, but we're using in this, we're using the known techniques, or techniques that only needs a minor tweaking, is what we're hoping. And so therefore it is safer than doing the basic research, where we basically a lot of times are using or researching diseases of unknown etiology. And the reason the risk is lower for this is that it's already been through the proof of principle testing, which is where you saw the highest risk. And the roadmap has already been laid out mostly.
Now, the bad news is we only invented this in the last year. And as you can tell just by taking this class, we're going forward in leaps and bounds in how we actually implement the theory. So as far as risk goes, it's higher now than it'll be in a year. Whoops, higher now, and it'll drop with time. But
hopefully,
it is a pattern.
I think it can't. I don't think it can drop under a certain thing because it is just what it is.
Yeah.
So, but the safety and efficacy testing steps are the same as for the basic research, which is what you had in the engineer diagram that Grant showed you from the very beginning. Those iterative phases and testing, and so those account. That's what you guys will be working in that framework together with us as basic researchers. And here are the risks that you saw on the other graph, just by themselves. So as you could see that this one has been not applicable for you guys. And this risk, we've taken it down because that's what we believe, that by doing what this systematic work the same way on all diseases, that it kind of takes the edge off that one.
At least we hope.
Yeah. This is a
hope plot.
Guesstimate. So, and then basic research. This is where the highest level of risks are, because we do the proof of principle, and it is very dangerous to explore these different diseases that we have done over the last years here. So also it's a bit higher for the prototype stage, because really we just don't know what we're doing. So we're learning as we go. We expand our models. We use things that hasn't been used before. We invent new things, how to do it on the fly. So therefore that phase is higher than what, that's why we estimated that for you guys, the prototype stage is more solid or less risky.
Less unknowns, yeah.
Yeah, so again, involving a client here, 1 or 2 clients who have the disease, they take the same risk that the researchers do in this phase. And you saw the long iterative loops of proof of principle to prototyping back to proof of principle. And so therefore it looks like this. See here, they're none under normal trauma. Maybe it was just a graph thing. I think so.
Whoops.
See?
Oh yeah.
That was production, right? Why is production blue? That's a mistake. It was me typing in those numbers.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Cool.
Take the full thing. Okay, you want to take this one?
Oh, what was the topic? Oh, so this is cool stuff. So now we're throwing you out into the sharks, and we're saying, okay, swim, swim, swim. And here's some stuff you might want to know before you're thrown in with the sharks. Okay. Research phase. I've got to read the slide here. Yeah, the research phase is the most dangerous. And you'll be testing it on yourselves. And as odd as that sounds, I've run across people who don't do that. They want to experiment on other people, but they sure as hell don't want to do it on themselves. They're willing for the other people to die, but not themselves. So in the way we do this work, you're involved right from the get-go. Let's see. And usually you work in teams. It's a lot more fun, isn't it, you guys, to have a team to work with rather than just be alone? Way more fun. One of the things we learned the hard way doing basic research was not everybody does the same process simultaneously, because that gives at least one person or more the ability to see if things go wonky. One really creepy example I can think of was we were in Australia working on a particular developmental event, and I was there, and I looked up and it got really quiet in the room, and I was wondering why. And the reason was because 3 or 4 of the other people in the room had quit breathing. So we triggered something where they were suffocating to death, but they were paralyzed and they couldn't move. That's yours. Isn't it? What does this one say? I wrote this 2 weeks ago. Oh yeah, this is a big one. One of the hugest problems over the years that we've had is that over and over and over again, the therapists don't believe anyone could get hurt. And there's so many reasons for that. There can be the fact that emotionally, they don't want that to be possible. They want everything to be safe in their life. Or it can be they simply don't have enough background to know that it can happen. They've never been exposed to research, and they just assume that everything is going to be fine, like making bread. Sometimes it's because they don't give a shit. They don't believe in the golden rule. They just want to be famous, and they don't give a crap what happens to other people. And unfortunately, we've seen that more than several times in the Institute. So that's probably the biggest hurdle I've seen. People just don't believe that subjects can be hurt. And the problem with that is then they don't plan for it. So it's kind of like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute and thinking everything will be okay. Not a really smart move. So like I said, just repeat some of these points. A lot of therapists just don't know that they don't know. Literally, they just don't realize that there's something to know about safety. Or they came from a career that they didn't have safety issues. And so they don't apply it to this new field. They have a spiritual orientation, and we see this unfortunately quite a bit in the Institute because our origins were with unusual states of consciousness. So we get people with a lot of beliefs around unusual states of consciousness that they're pretty much not willing to let go of. Yeah, and sometimes you can spot these people because they're unwilling to use informed consent and liability forms. Sometimes it's sheer greed. They don't want to lose clients, but sometimes they don't really accept that things can go wrong. And an interesting one was in trainers. They didn't follow up. This was in the early years, but I was trying to encourage other people to become trainers. And what I found consistently is they were trainers from before, and they wouldn't follow up on their students. And part of it is because they didn't do that with their students before, because there was a lot more, okay, we're going to throw this shit at you, and it's up to you, sink or swim. But the other problem was because they didn't realize it was a problem. Because they didn't do follow-up, they weren't seeing the casualties. And when I actually forced these people to start following up on their students, lo and behold, they were getting, 10, 20% casualties, and these casualties weren't willing to talk to the teachers about it. So there was no feedback, and it was actually getting them to call these students that actually started making that feedback happen. Yeah.
I could add one more to that list, Grant. And that is therapists do find it hard to say no to people. Now, this might be due to manipulation fungus or some other trauma, but the client who's tried everything, and there's like, you guys seem like you got breakthrough stuff. I'm willing to sign anything, and for us to be able to say, look, I understand where you're coming from, but the safety risk is too high. We have to say no.
So say no to the client is what you mean?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes we know we can't cure disease, so it's really handy when you actually know where the limits of what we do are. That doesn't mean that there's not other techniques that could, and we encourage you to explore other avenues and other techniques. But there's some things that we just know in research we don't have a handle on yet.
Mm-hmm.
Next one. Okay. Problem of finding test subjects. This is the one I already spoke about. Because a lot of people don't have a emotional acceptance that there's safety issues, they skip tests. Why? Because it's a hassle. It's a real pain to get people to give you feedback. It's a pain to get them. It takes hours and hours and hours. It's difficult to get them to show up when you want to do the thing, you have a call and only half the people show, that sort of thing. It's really a struggle, okay? Lack of healthy test subjects. In this case, we use the Institute for Healthy Subjects. But if you think about yourself, if you weren't involved in the Institute and you wanted to do proper safety testing, how the hell would you do it? Would you go around to your relatives and say, oh, I want you to test this particular process? Well, I suppose if you hate your relatives, that would be a good plan, because then, if something goes wrong. But really, you need a structure to do this sort of adequate safety testing on, and that's why the Institute's built the way it is. We also need a lot of sick volunteers. So in COVID, for example, we've had a hell of a time getting enough COVID people, because usually the disease is a very short, couple of weeks. And then on top of that, as soon as we figure out we have a problem, we have to go through that research cycle one more time. So you need a lot of sick volunteers, which means you need an organization who can find the sick volunteers. And the third category is there's a real temptation to use anybody off the street. You think they've got the disease, but then they have other things too. And that makes the testing just go wonky. You don't know whether what you did worked or it doesn't work, or you just don't get it. So you need to have enough volunteers to pick out the ones that actually have the disease you want to work on. So for example, if you were trying to test out Asperger's, and you go to the autism helpline, and then you started getting real autistic people in, you would find that your Asperger process didn't work, because unbeknownst to you, you're seeing a different disease. So there's some real complexities here. The bottom line is you need to be part of an organization. You really can't do that safety testing on your own, unless you're willing to give years and years of basically one at a time by accident sort of stuff. Okay. Again, that's why the Institute was formed the way it is. Okay. Yeah, and I mentioned this before. It's a pain to do safety testing. It's hard to do. And if you look out into the world, you see a lot of people throwing out these techniques without adequately testing them for safety. In a lot of cases, it doesn't matter, because the techniques don't work anyway. It's all bullshit. But in the case of stuff, people are using techniques like our own, you're modifying the interior of the cells and such, and you really can cause problems. So where does it go wrong? Well, you need time. You can't rush this process, because you're working with just random people as experimental subjects, even if they're therapists. And to get all these people through this process, it takes way more time than you'd expect. In a perfect world, you'd line them up and just run them through the gate, but it isn't going to happen that way. The other problem that often happens is you feel pushed to get the process out. So say in the example of COVID, we felt a real push because people were dying all over the planet. There's already 3 million deaths, and they're still rising. And that can be a mistake. You need to really do the safety testing. You don't want to actually put something out that causes more harm than good. And you need to do long-term follow-up. It isn't good enough to just pump it out the door and then go home. You have to be willing to observe that, hey, something could be wrong when it's tested on large numbers of people. So these are all the problems that we experience in the Institute. And they're all reasons why people don't want to do it. It's just a pain. Can you guys relate to this? If you look at that list, can you think of yourself and go, yeah, I don't want to do it? I mean, I would. I was forced to do it. Go ahead.
Often the issue is the following. So the client to follow, you ask questions and stuff like that, and don't answer or something.
Yeah, and you have to track them down and chase them down. When we were doing Lyme testing, we had something that worked and it was stable for a couple of weeks, and then it fell apart again, and the client didn't let us know. Well, part of that is because at the testing phase, everything's free, so there's no incentive for them to call back. So you'd expect someone who was suffering from a terrible disease to call you back if they got worse or, you know, like that. But it doesn't happen a lot of times.
Is it the apex effect, kind of?
No, this is a case where the treatment didn't work.
Yes, but because the client is used to have the issue, so that he got back having the issue, so then he forget, okay, I'm used to having the issue anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what the reason is, but I just observe it a lot. Personally, I think it's being completely insane, but you know, maybe they're just feeling disappointed or loss of hope or something.
A little exercise coming up.
Yeah, come to think of that.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
it's similar to that, Grant. I think a lot of the times, by the time they got to us, they've tried so many things, and it's like, it's just another thing I tried that didn't work.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so here's an interesting little thing. If you run a test and then something goes wrong the next day. So you did the test and then they call you up and they say,
Next day.
I'm all screwed up, right? So
you go to
yeah, so assuming that they say they've got a problem, how are you going to figure out what the reason is? Well, the first thing you do is you assume it's your process and you recheck, say, well, actually I have something else. Yeah, this is, and I even make this mistake now. I forget to check for pre-existing conditions because a lot of times they'll say, I'm all screwed up. And you think, oh my God, it's my process. But in truth, they're just saying that they're feeling miserable because from their viewpoint, feeling miserable is the problem, not feeling miserable about the thing that they were being treated on. So you have to check for pre-existing conditions. Yeah. Then I'd go into the process. Did they actually finish the process that you intended them to do? So recheck the developmental event or whatever it was that you were trying to accomplish. Yeah. So now at that point you go, uh-oh, everything's looking, none of those are the problem. What's the next one? Well, oddly enough, over the years, we've seen some interesting problems with the people who were actually exposed to a sickness ahead of time, and it just accidentally turned on when we were doing the process, just by sheer bad timing, on luck. Also, we've seen them taking pills, sometimes vitamins. I can think of one client who took vitamins and couldn't sleep. And she took more vitamins for that, trying to make herself better. And it just made her sleep more and more and more. And it was went on for months. So people take stuff and they don't actually think to tell you. And sometimes it can be what's causing their problem and they don't realize it. So yeah, you got to check to see, did they do something new? Is it a food that they've been exposed to, or drugs, or, you know, like that? Like I said, you'd think that they would tell you, but they don't. It's just weird as hell. Okay, then there's outer triggers. Oh, it's all bad, but they neglect to tell you that they just got fired, or their spouse left them, or, you know, some sort of weird outer trauma going on that had absolutely nothing to do with what you're doing. Now, there you have to be a little cautious, because sometimes the outer drama is actually due to the crap that you've induced in them. So you have to keep that one with a grain of salt. You might actually go ahead and heal their issue around whatever drama they have. And if they've still got a problem, you start to get suspicious and go, shit, this could be something that I've done. And finally, our old standby, they got manipulation fungus, or they got Borg issues. And we've definitely seen that happen over the years. Part of it is because these processes change people, and the people around them don't want them to change. And it can trigger all kinds of stuff, whether it's the Borg saying that, no, you don't want to be better, or, you know, people they know want them, keep them in whatever state they're in, and so on and so forth. Those are the ones that I know of. If you can think of other ones for this chart, that'd be great. There's probably more, but I did this last night at about 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's all I could come up with. 10 o'clock.
Body association, or they got a new state. So they got a new peak state to something, or the body is reacting to that. So that will go with the.
Well, if it's a state, I suppose, yeah. You want to make a note of that?
Because I noticed that.
This is usually PI.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of the PI thing. But
Yeah, but PI at the end we got some peak state sometimes. We do.
that's possible.
Mm.
Although the theory right now is the state that they get isn't going to trigger any of those problems. God willing, that'll be the case.
Some people are just really resistant to having peak states, Grant.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're hoping that this new technology with the generationals will sneak up on them and they'll get the state before they have a chance to resist. Okay.
This chart can apply to certified therapists. That could be useful for them. When we are reading an issue with the client and the next day, I have more issue now, but sometimes we are not sure if the issue they have is from our trauma healing session or from other stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So this sort of applies to regular therapists too. Yeah, so if you can think of any other to put on there, just give me a phone call and I'll add it to the chart. Was this helpful, or is this slide a waste?
no, I like it.
Yeah, because if it was so obvious, we won't include it in the textbook. But if you think it's,
I think it could be refined, maybe.
Yeah.
It was done last minute, but
yeah,
it's
but
okay. It's good.
I did it.
I would not mind having more, maybe not step, maybe it's a lot of work for you, but like, okay, if that is a pre-existing condition, what question would we ask? What are we checking with the client? Maybe more details on that, if it's possible.
What?
So
I'm sorry.
you're saying diagnostic questions, what to ask
kind of, yeah,
to the
if possible, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So data collection of data for both for making sure that we're actually doing and solving the right thing, but also for potential later publications or other interesting things. So first of all, symptoms and markers are important to gather. And because the symptoms is what the client can actually report back, you need them to reflect your markers in a way that is in line with what the process is actually able to do. So if you think about the Asperger's process, you have this symptom of the glass wall. You can have symptoms in the client saying, I can't connect, I can't this and this and that. But literally, if you broaden out too much of that symptom list, you actually compromise your success rate, because the process is designed for one thing, and that is to remove the kinesthetic symptom that is the glass wall. Yeah. So that's how they relate to each other. Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, the glass wall would be your marker in this case. Yeah. They may not even be aware of it.
And the symptom is that they can't feel the world because of it. I don't know what the next bullet point is. Is it the same thing that you just went through?
Yeah, what I mentioned. Yeah, you have to follow up. You can't rely on them to tell you the truth. You have to follow up.
Actually, a lot of you probably do this with your clients, saying that, okay, give me feedback in 2 days to see how it goes. And then when 2 days have come around and you don't hear from the client, then you can actually, or the third day, you can say, okay, something is either off or they just forgot, and you can send them a message. But it's good to have an appointment. How do you say that? An agreement about giving feedback.
Yeah, that's one nice thing about the rule of three. You almost automatically set this up.
Yeah, so you get the feedback.
Yeah.
So this is the patient compliance and the follow-up problem that we've talked about before. How do you get this important feedback? And like we mentioned this client of Lyme's disease, where we thought this process worked and it didn't. Statistics and double-blind studies, like what is done in medical research, that's actually what we're met with a lot, saying, come back when you have that. We want to see that on your work. Otherwise, we don't believe that it actually does work. And our work just doesn't really fit into it, and it doesn't really need it. And can you maybe elaborate on that? Because that's part of the thing is that it's more the engineer perspective, right? It has to work. But in that case, people would say, well, then that would be easy to throw into this. But one of the things is these 4 things here at the bottom, that some people just can't face these traumas. So people who come from the world saying that if you could just test this in a double-blind way, then you'd be good, you know. But if something doesn't work, it might not be that the technique doesn't work. It could be that it's just simply too difficult to face. It could be that the technique is not simple enough, and that there are confounding variables in some patients and not in others. So again, background diseases, background problems can cause things to not work all the time.
Yeah, but our orientation is very different, because
yes,
we look at that. Yeah. So the medical model would say, you know, you need that, but the engineering model would say that's absolutely stupid. Would you do a double-blind experiment on a new iPhone? Hell no. If the iPhone didn't work, you would just figure out why. Now, once you figured out why, you may say, well, that group of people isn't worth working with because blah, blah, blah. But you don't just randomly say that it's only 60% effective iPhone. Like I said, the exception, of course, is the PC. But
so I think I have a couple comments here. One is that I get that why we don't do double-blind studies, and when I'm talking to about this, is like, if something works, there you don't need, you know, p-values and such, because it's obsolete, because it just is, you know, it just works.
It's the BO, that's bloody obvious.
Yeah, bloody obvious, right? But I think that it's possible to do double-blind studies, and it's one of the things I'm interested in, because in order to get into the medical research, we need to, if you will, speak their language. And it's one of the things, hopefully, with Joy, our principal investigator, and some of her contacts, and Grant and Kirsten earlier talked about IRBs, and just so in essence, right now, in order to start to bridge that gap, we need to, you know, play in their field with their rules, and then just bring, in order to get noticed. So it's not that we can't do double-blind studies. It's just right now you don't need them, but at least that's my perspective.
Yeah, it doesn't teach us anything. We don't learn anything from them.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that thing about publication that Mary, I know you and Joy are looking into. And one of the things is that we get good symptom lists that reflect the disease, and also that we might look into what is it that the current field, how do they actually measure outcome of that disease with various techniques or treatments that they use already.
Yeah, I just want to put in another reiteration or exclamation point here, because our goal is actually getting into various journals and start to show up as a research entity for people that are looking at research. I mean, yes, we are this amazing research entity. It's just that no one knows about the research we're doing. And for that, if we're talking about a disease that's known in medicine, that using the tools, the techniques, the surveys or whatever, how is it measured out there? When you're looking at symptom lists or markers or how you're tracking things, it would be really useful to figure out how that's being done in other research. So then if it becomes something that's publishable, you will have that database. So I would just, put that out there as a test, as opposed to making up a survey that really doesn't have any measured validity out in the medical community.
And that's what we plan on doing whenever we think that a disease is something that we might publish. Then we would set up a group that looks into exactly that, getting a list and how is it measured in publications out there, what's the standard, the golden standard for outcome and things like that.
This video was an excerpt from an in-house institute psycho-immunology training class held May 9, 2021. Thank you for watching.